Okay.
Um, Lots to discuss as usual. And for our top news, this is about artificial intelligence blowing up tennis. That'll be interesting. For coronavirus, we have some COVID lessons from Japan. Apparently, the right messaging can really empower citizens. In technology, the deliveries of electric Fords, their Lightning program has officially begun. And so Ford did this before Tesla did. In environment, some scientists, not all, but now say warming could stop relatively quickly if emissions go to zero into the atmosphere and into the seas. In materials, physicists use intuition and superconductors to identify new high temperature superconductor in space. And I don't know really what this is all about. There may be as many as 4 evil civilizations in our galaxy. Apparently, says Richard, it's still just a guess. In biology, apparently, when male buddies, particularly of primates, become less important than female mating partners. Apparently, male friendships could be beneficial for male reproduction. How about for humans? For humans, then, what is it about the human brain that makes us smarter than other animals? New research gives an intriguing answer. In health, all physicians should know the benefits of plant-based diets for these 6 health conditions: weight loss and maintenance, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and COVID. So those are the things we'll talk about today. And Richard, you can tell us about this top story about how artificial intelligence blew up tennis.
Now, this article is based on a discussion with a tennis player and coach who's been playing tennis most of her life. Her name is Birdie Lynch. And one aspect of the game that she's noticed is the embrace of technology at all levels of tennis. And she says tennis is such a technical sport. These days, anyone I play or coach is big into technology, whether it's video analysis or longest rally statistics. And she personally uses a range of applications and techniques for her own matches and her coaching, including smartphone-based video system called Swing Vision that breaks down her performance with details such as forehand errors and backhand winners. And she says, I can see a clearer vision of what I can improve. And in sports, data analytics has been around for a long time. The famous case is the 2002 Oakland Athletic baseball team, which used statistical analysis to choose their squad, and they were quite successful with a much lower budget than other teams. And it was the basis of the best-selling book and movie Moneyball. And so tennis has also seen this revolution. And one of the coaches, Craig O'Shaughnessy, says data blew up our sport. And for him, it started in the 2015 Australian Open. And there were the two top players were battling it out on the court, and while they were doing it, powerful computers were analyzing their game, and one of the things they did was group rally length into three different categories: short, medium, and long. And uh, they discovered something that surprised them that they didn't know. And that is, they discovered that 70% of the points were players hitting the ball into the court a maximum of just twice. So 70% of the points were with short exchanges. And he said that insight made him realize that the way that they were having the tennis players practice was all wrong. And that time they were spending 90% of practice focused on consistency. But it turns out only 10% of the points in these uh, big games are from long rallies. And so, why have them spend all of their time practicing what is not generating uh, many points? And so he says, quote, this data has changed our sport forever. And coaches now have AI systems that they use that can spot patterns that a human would never be able to see. For example, if a pro has 50 winners from his forehand, they can break those 50 winners down in different ways, and they can see 40 of those 50 winners came when he was serving. And then they can see that 35 of them came on the first shot after the service. So this data, they can see again that the way to improve your game is do better on your return of the time when they hit the ball back after your serve. So you can concentrate on that and learn to do it better and win more games. And uh, now they've been doing this kind of analysis of these top level games now since 2015, and each year they're collecting statistics and videos from about 700 games each season. AI is trained by big amounts of data, and now they're accumulating more data, so it's getting better. And there's one of these application, Roland Garros player apps, that many of the players use now, and they can use it to see exactly the placement of key shots and winners and errors and serves. And uh, last year, the number of players using this system uh, about doubled, and now there are 1,100 players and coaches using these AI powered videos. The other thing that is happening with AI is it's speeding up media coverage for the tournament. It turns out the AI is slicing and dicing the data to create video commentary of the match in a matter of seconds. And these are jobs that if you're doing it as a human, it would take hours to do. So now uh, a fan can be watching a game and get high level analysis of the game in a matter of seconds. And so it's interesting to me. This is an example of AI used in a real life situation, in a situation that you might not automatically guess, but to have AI come in and revolutionize how they practice and prepare for world level tennis matches shows the way that these AI systems can be applied successfully in areas that we never imagined.
Any thoughts?
Well, I wonder if it increases the joy of playing tennis.
Well, I suspect if I win, I'm more joyful.
Uh,
And, these guys spend hundreds of hours of preparation. And
well,
if you can spend your time more effectively,
I guess for a professional or you do it for money, that's one thing. But
yes.
yeah, I'm not so sure if I would care to know how. Of course, I haven't played tennis for 100 years anyway.
But here, Chad, you were talking about golf, and without knowing it, I imagine they must have these systems for golf players. And if you could have an AI system coaching you how to play better golf, would you use it?
I think I would. They do have systems, of course, that can tell you what your club head speed is, and they take videos of your swing and all of that kind of thing. But I think this is something quite a bit different than that. I don't know of any programs that have analyzed individual players and figured out the best way to train is to do this or that. Well, as I'm talking, I'm changing my mind because they do have a lot of statistics in golf anyway, and they do focus on a player's weakness in their training, the professionals. I mean, if they're putting 160th, they need to figure out how to putt better. So, but it's all after the fact, of course, and but it controls their training certainly.
Moving on to coronavirus, what are these lessons from Japan about the right messaging and empowers citizens? What's that about?
Now, it's interesting. Through the 6 waves of COVID so far in Japan, the number of cases and deaths per capita has been significantly lower than in the other G7 countries, the other major economies of the world. And this is despite Japan having the world's oldest population and being densely packed. You would think both of those things would mean that their case levels would be higher. Now, yes, Japan does have higher vaccination rates, especially for older people, and masking is common in Japan, but neither of these is a full explanation. Deaths were low even before vaccines were available, and masks are common throughout Asia. So it's not due to vaccines, it's not due to masks. And uh, they've tried to figure out what is the difference, and they feel like strong social pressure is one of the things that has probably helped boost the protective measures like mask raising and wearing and minimizing risky behavior. And as they looked at COVID, many cases are mild or asymptomatic, so people can spread the disease without being sick, and that makes COVID far less visible and harder to control. Japan further has the issue of their constitution prevents strict lockdown. So they had to try to do it some other way. One of the things that helped them as they began, Japan already had in place more than 8,000 contact tracers. And so one of the things they did in the beginning of the epidemic, by February of 2020, that's really early in the time, because of the contract tracing, scientists had already identified many clusters of transmissions and realized that most infected people didn't infect anyone else, but a few people infected many. And looking at the issues that they saw, it led them to warn against what they call the three C's. There's a Japanese word for it that became very popular, sanmitsu. And this is closed environments, crowded conditions, and close contact settings. And so they heavily, to their population, promoted this concept of avoiding the three C's, avoiding this high risk activity. And it looks like in Japan, I don't know what it is, that it's a homogeneous population, one in which social pressure is more important than other places. But in Japan, uh, that has been able to keep their infection rates below that of equivalent countries in the West. They credit their three C's, but I think it's a combination of the three C's and their particular population. They do say now the situation is becoming more complicated. People are more reluctant to accept strict measures, and vaccine coverage is high, and fatality rates are down, and there are more interventions available. Uh, but they say these phrases such as exit strategy or back to normal are used by people longing for the days when we lived without the threat of the virus, but we are nowhere near back to normal. And so Japan was able to do something that most of the other countries in the world were not able to do. Uh, Again, I don't know. It's because they have a more defined population group where the social pressure to conform is higher, or just what it is, but they credit the three C's.
Any
And
thoughts?
also,
Yeah, I think it is.
The Japanese wear masks if they have the flu or a cold or whatever.
Right. As
Always
do,
have.
as do they in other places in Asia. I saw people wearing masks in Hong Kong in the 1970s.
I also think that homogeneity is a big factor. Japan is somewhat isolated from the rest of the world. After
Yes.
all, it's a big island, and I think they take warnings serious, and they don't take offense right away, but rather they listen, and if it makes sense, they do it. So
Well, also in Japan, they seem to have a high premium on conformity. They have the saying that the nail that sticks out is the one that'll be hammered down.
yeah, yeah.
I spent some time in Japan, and I agree with everything you said. There's a lot of social pressure to conform. They are responsible to authority. If authority tells them to do something, they're more likely to do it and not complain about it. They just accept it. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the way it is.
Oh, I like your science T-shirt, by the way, for today.
Yeah.
I'm glad you put it on.
Had to change out of my pajamas.
I'm glad you did that too.
Moving on to technology. Apparently, the deliveries of the all-electric Ford, the F-150 Lightning, has begun. And Ford is delivering the electric vehicles before Tesla. Tell us about this.
Now, the first electric Ford F-150 Lightning has been delivered to a retail customer. It was a couple of weeks ago. Now, this customer pre-ordered his decked out F-150 Lightning in May of 2021. And he got his delivery only a year later. And it turns out he was one of the lucky ones. Ford vastly underestimated the reaction to their electric pickup truck, and they got 200,000 reservations last year. And because of that, they turned up their delivery plans, but their plans this year are to make 40,000 and next year to make 150,000. And in the first 2 years of production, they won't make enough to fill the pre-orders that were made last year. So, that I have been a marketing guy introducing products in my career, and never did I have or could I imagine starting a new product and already having orders for 2 years worth of production. So, we'll see how the truck does. We'll see how the reviews are. There haven't been enough delivered to customers for independent reviews to happen yet, but I would say they're off to a pretty amazing start.
Any thoughts?
Very, very low volume. Very low volume. Musk, Tesla turned out almost 1 million vehicles last year.
And how many of those were pickup trucks?
Zero.
Uh,
Have you seen the Tesla pickup truck?
yes, of course.
It is about the ugliest thing you can imagine.
It's creative and imaginative, I think.
Okay.
But it's not shipping.
But it's not shipping. Now, the creative and imagining might be what you say to a friend who shows you his new painting, and you step back and say, that's interesting. Not wanting to insult them. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about Tesla's truck is that Tesla figured out a whole new approach to making bodies. And when he is through, that's going to end up meaning the production costs for the truck are a lot lower because the body is a lot cheaper to make. What remains to be seen is the customer acceptance of that body style.
I think most Americans want their truck to be big and look like a brute force coming down the road.
I've heard women's comments about why Americans like big trucks.
That's what she said.
Moving on to environment and climate. Some scientists now say that warming could stop relatively quickly if emissions go to zero into the air and seas. Tell us about that, Richard. And do all scientists say that?
I'm not sure about all scientists saying it, but uh, what they are saying now is that basically uh, there has been a widespread idea for a long time that says for decades or even centuries, additional warming is already baked into this system. And this idea, they say, is based on an unfortunate misunderstanding of experiments that are done with climate research. And what they are saying now is, quote, it's our best understanding that if we bring down CO2 to net zero, the warming will level off and the climate will stabilize within a decade. And there is less warming in the pipeline than we thought. And this is really encouraging. Another statement they have is that about global warming is, quote, we could prevent it right now if we're willing to make a substantive shift to clean energy, which we are technologically able to do. I think perhaps this finding uh, will encourage action because it says that things are not as hopeless as we have thought. And if we can get our CO2 emissions under control, then we can stop things from getting worse. Then, if we can pull some CO2 out of the air, it starts to get better. And I think this is a different story than we've been hearing for the last few years. So I think it's pretty encouraging.
Any
But there
thoughts?
is a lag in the time to do it. Getting to zero carbon takes many years.
Hmm. It also turns out one of the things in this story that I didn't realize is we are entering a 30-year period of reduced solar activity. And so in the world, this reduced solar activity is going to bring the temperature down by about 1 degree C. And this reduced solar activity actually uh, gives us a little bit more time to replace the stuff that we're trying to replace. So we have a 30-year period of relatively mild solar weather in which to put this stuff out there.
Other thoughts? Moving on to materials. A physicist identifies a new high temperature superconductor. And how did he do it? Using intuition and supercomputers. Tell us about it.
Now, part of what interests me about this story is the way that this kind of science is done now. There is intuition from a researcher who has spent decades of her life studying these kind of materials. And she says, uh, you know, the people who do this kind of study end up gaining understandings that they can't really express, and it comes out as intuition. And the thing she did with her intuition is the things that she's studying, these quantum effects on materials, are you can deal with them with these computers and AI systems, but even to deal with what's happening at a quantum level with a few molecules takes enormous computing power. So, what she is using in her study is the Stampede 2 supercomputer at the Texas Advanced Computing Center, and it's the second fastest of any computer in any university in the US. So she's using her intuition and the second fastest computer at any school in America to do it. And uh, what she has been researching and what she discovered was a new class of superconducting materials, which are quintuple layer nickelates. And she has been studying these kind of materials for a while. And what they are made of is two materials that are adjacent on the periodic table of the elements. So she started to look at other adjacent materials and see what you can do. And she had the intuition about another material and started to study it, and then found yet another superconductor. And one of the things that she has seen is that superconduction starts to happen when electrons pair up with other electrons, and when they are able to do that, then they are able to resist magnetic forces, and apparently these magnetic forces are what prevent superconduction from occurring otherwise. And so what she has done is find a class of materials that exhibit what is called a large super exchange, which is the material uh, frees up electrons in copper atoms through a pathway that contains oxygen rather than directly. And they think this is one factor that she's discovered that uh, encourages the superconductors. So again, here uh, she uses computers to study this because the scale that things happen are on the tiniest scales that are known to human beings, and they can only be probed obliquely by physical experiments, so you have to use computers. And uh, here, the combination of a developed intuition of a scientist plus these computer tools opens the door to new understandings, and this new understanding is one of the highest temperature superconductors they found so far.
Any thoughts?
How warm was the superconductor?
It didn't say. I would like it to say, but it didn't.
Well, if we don't have a lot of things being said about that, what about our next story about 4 evil civilizations in our galaxy? What is this?
That's right. This is a uh, new paper that was published recently that stirred up a lot of comments because he claimed that there are as many as 4 malicious alien civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. The paper has not been peer reviewed yet, and it's not a leap to think that if aliens are anything like humans, that is, if they're warlike and prone to invade the territory of others, there's a pretty strong probability that there'll be some number who could pose a threat to us. Now, one of the things that the author is being criticized for is he's not an astrophysicist. Rather, he is studying conflict resolution for a PhD. And so he's a grad student, in other words. And basically, this paper is part thought experiment and part game theory predictions. And he says by using known data about the way that humans have historically invaded each other's territory and comparing then this to the number of assumed habitable exoplanets in the Milky Way, then this prediction is based on these factors. And he says he comes up with 4 hostile civilizations doing predictions based on that. The thing is, the Milky Way is a big place, and that the Earth is vastly more likely to be destroyed by an asteroid than by one of these 4 warlike species that he calculates ought to be there. Now, are you gonna worry at night about them?
Oh, absolutely.
I wonder if he is acquainted with the Drake equation that attempts to determine how many civilizations there are in the galaxy. There's an equation where you can enter all this in, and
it's Dirac or something like that.
Right.
Yes.
I went through it with the current scientific information that we have, and it comes out to that there's one in our galaxy, and it's us.
Okay. But that calculation is based on a few assumptions. Basically, like every term in the equation.
Right. There's about 7 assumptions, but each one of them is a logical assumption.
Right, of course.
So, how many planets are there in the Goldilocks zone, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Interesting.
I wonder, Chad, if you make a lot of logical assumptions, at what point does another logical assumption that you need to make become illogical? Does the number of logic things produce illogic?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but it is certainly true. The more assumptions you have in there, the more you're going to come to a situation where you only have one galaxy, or you only have one civilization in the galaxy, and you can change these assumptions, though.
What if you change them and it says you only have 0 intelligence?
Well, then chances are one of your assumptions is wrong.
Or that we're not as smart as we think.
In Asimov's writing, where you make an awful lot of assumptions, at some point, Each of them makes an awful lot of sense, but you had to do so many of them that at some point, what he predicts is no longer particularly valid.
I agree,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure how that changes his calculation of 4 evil civilizations.
Yeah.
And I would
Moving
feel a little
on.
better if he was an astrophysicist instead of a behavioral PhD student.
Right.
Richard, what's this about male friendships can be beneficial for male reproduction in primates? And you ask, how about for humans? What is this?
Well, close friendships among males are rare in the animal kingdom. And the usually males compete for rank and for access for females. However, male friendships also can be beneficial to male reproduction, as friends can provide support in climbing the rank. When I was in India, there were tribes of langur monkeys around, and the big tribe had one male and a bunch of females, and there were tribes of bachelor males around, and the bachelor males were helping each other get ready for the day when one of them would challenge the male for the championship of the harem. And so I think that's kind of what they're talking about. And so researchers wanted to investigate this, and they used some uh, wild guinea baboons in Senegal. And these baboons are known for strong bonds among male and a lack of clear male hierarchy. And what they thought they would find was that males that had the most friends were going to be the most attractive to females because the additional friends could protect the females and their offsprings better against predators. But they didn't find this out at all. They found out having many friends was not at all related to male reproductive success. Instead, what they found out is once males started to associate with females and began to sire offspring, they didn't spend as much time with the other males, and they drastically adjusted their social time to hang out with the ladies. And doing this then helped them to maximize their reproductive success. And uh, one of the things they saw is while they there had these societies of male bachelor males, uh, that was mainly young and old bachelors, and males of age, instead of hanging out in the bachelor quarters, were flirting with the women. And their success as a reproduction depended not on how many male friends they had, but how good they were with the ladies. So I wonder if there's anything we can learn from the baboons. I guess we also fit that because here we are, a bunch of males associating with each other, and we're all older. We're not in the game, and so we show part of what they saw in the bachelor communities of baboons. No, I'm not saying you're all a bunch of baboons, but I am maybe.
Then, Richard, for our last story about health, it
Next to the
says that
last, we have the human brain.
Oh, sorry, I missed that one. What it is about the human brain that makes us smarter than other animals? What's this intriguing answer?
Uh, Humans are unrivaled in the area of cognition, uh, even though there are other primates that have good brains and other animals. So far, we think we're the best. And scientists, this is one of the things where scientists have been studying and trying to figure out why is this the case. And uh, these people who were studying it, one of the things that they saw is there is not just one way that the brain processes information, and uh, that how the information is processed in the brain differs between humans and other primates. What they found is that uh, different brain regions, in fact, process information differently. And so there's some brain uh, components like senses, like eyes and the sensory and motor functions that communicate in a very stereotypic way using input and output. And there are, if you take, for example, the eyes, the majority of the information in the eyes is duplicated with the two eyes, and this is called, in information processing terms, redundant processing. And redundant processing provides for robustness and reliability, and uh, it also, in these sense organs, the communication is direct between the brain regions and the senses because you need fast response. However, uh, the not all the information provided by the eyes are redundant. Combining information from the two eyes ultimately allows our brain to determine depth and distance between objects. And this kind of information processing is called synergistic. And excuse me, I have to break for a moment. Somebody is ringing my doorbell madly. I'll be back in a minute.
Was it just me, or did I not get the half a dozen or 8 or 10 articles? I got the whole batch, which was too much to read. Did I miss something?
No, same here, Chad.
Okay.
I got the full document.
I'm sorry. They're back, and it was just somebody, I think, looking for money, and she rang the doorbell frantically for a while and didn't get a fast response and left. Anyway, so they found out that there's a kind of processing that is synergistic, and what they have found is that when they analyze the human brain against primate brains, then the newer parts of the human brain are composed of more cells that operate on this synergistic level. And so it's like the uh, brain growth, the new brain growth that made humans was mainly in this synergistic processing cells. And if you compare humans with monkeys, macaques, for example, uh, they have similar levels of redundant processing in both brains, but the human brain does much more synergistic processing. They also analyzed human DNA and brain DNA, and they found that in these parts of the brain that do this more synergistic processing are DNA in the human brains that don't exist in the primate brain. So these changes to make the human brain better at synergistic processing have clearly been one of the things that makes us human. And this synergistic processing is the processing that not only takes the sensory data in, but takes in all the other information from the brain. And what turns out to be better about humans than primates is we're better at using all of the information of our brain to do what we have to do. So, welcome to the world of synergistic processing, and you may never have realized it, but that's what makes you so special, guys.
Any thoughts?
Well, I've always thought that humans were part of the animal species after all. And I mean, you look at the various species, every one species has a specialty. Some have big teeth, others have large muscles where they can run forever, and so on and so forth. And you know, as humans, we have a little bit of everything. But if we're trying to compare ourselves with some of these wild animals in the field, and we meet them on our own terms, that is, without all the things that have developed around us, clothing and arms and all that, we would be the loser. But because of the fact that we have our brains and that work a little better, we have developed a system to defend ourselves and grow our food and do our things, and we continuously get better at it. In fact, we're so good that we're killing ourselves.
Richard, I've been surprised. I think that other animals have larger brains than we do,
Not the
physically
size,
larger.
it's not the size, but the way they work.
And also the ratio of the brain to body mass. But I think, Norman, you're could be right. I think octopuses, for example, have a bigger brain in terms of body mass than we do, and maybe porpoises do as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This one was not testing synergistic processing among these other species. So this was just checking humans against our near relatives to see what was different in terms of brain mechanics. But that would be a good thing to do next.
Well then, Richard, on to the last story on health, and it's saying that all physicians should know the benefits of plant-based diet for 6 health conditions. What about that?
Well, the first part of it is you would think that medicine would be promoting healthy lifestyle choices, but if you look at it, medical schools offer an anemic number of hours in nutrition education over the 4 years of the program. So they're not educated in these areas very well. But still, though all physicians are not experts in nutrition, uh, they should at least have some knowledge about the benefits of a plant-based diet for a number of common conditions. The first is weight loss and maintenance. A study of 70,000 people found that those who consumed a vegan diet weighed about 9 pounds less than those who did not, and also had a reduced risk of death. You would think that would matter to a doctor. Also, cardiovascular disease. They found that those consuming a vegetarian diet had decreased their LDL bad cholesterol by 13 milligrams per deciliter, and another analysis found 24% lower rate of heart disease deaths among vegetarians compared to omnivores. I think most of us are omnivores. In terms of cancer, healthy behaviors reduce cancer risk, breast cancer risk, by as much as 50%. So again, I would think that would matter to the doctors and would matter to us. Diabetes, people who consumed a plant-based diet could expect a 34% reduction in type 2 diabetes risk. So that's pretty significant. In Alzheimer's disease, which I think is something that concerns many of us, a plant-based Mediterranean kind of diet has a 50% lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. And last is COVID. They found people who had primarily a plant-based diet, there was a 41% reduction in risk of severe COVID, as well as a 9% reduction of infection of any severity. And so they're saying, maybe these plant-based diets are better for us than we think, and it would be really good for our doctors to understand this and so encourage us to take actions that are best for our own health. I know Carol and I, over the last year, have gone to a much more plant-based diet, and at least half of the days we have our eating plan is entirely plant-based. So we've actually made changes here, and I hope that'll do us good, and maybe they would do us all good.
Any thoughts? Richard, I'm not entirely sure when they say plant-based, because you use plant-based and Mediterranean. And Mediterranean, although it has a lot of plants, also has other stuff. And so it seems to me, I don't know how you can measure these things when it's all over the map.
Uh-huh. It's hard, but the Mediterranean that they're talking about was still a subset of Mediterranean, where you took the fish out and had it replace it with plant-based sources, I believe. So,
Okay. But one of the things that when you compare to things where people are eating meat, an awful lot depends on what kind of meat they eat.
sure.
And for example, is it things that are mainly eating grain, or is it things that are eating normal plants.
Or
Or
legumes are the other alternative.
yeah, and if you're mainly vegan, it becomes somewhat difficult to get enough vitamin B6,
Mhm.
vitamin B12. So I think a little bit it's, I think some of the researchers are saying we need to make sure we have enough vitamin B12, and the only way to get that is through meat. And then there are other
Or
researchers say, but there
supplements,
are
of
some
course.
that are inherently bad, and I don't know I don't know how to compare those.
Well, I agree with you. There is granularity that we need in the research, and they haven't done enough of that yet. One of the other issues that I have a concern about is one of the amino acids, choline. Choline is necessary for the brain and for brain health. And on a vegan diet, choline is hard to get. In a vegetarian diet, because choline is found in eggs, then a vegetarian still can have ample amounts of choline, but a vegan has trouble with choline unless they supplement. And I think there are other issues like that that I'm not aware of. On the other side of it, there is plenty of evidence that increasing your consumption, particularly of nuts, is good for your heart and for your brain. And, I certainly agree with you. We don't have enough data with enough granularity yet to be able to make a lot of conclusive statements. But in terms of the general stuff, I think they're able to sort out vegetarians from non-vegetarians and give us some gross numbers. And the gross numbers that they give us say that reducing your meat content for most people increases the health. Now, I don't know if reducing it means eliminating it or not because of the kidney issues that I have. I feel like I can't eliminate meat entirely because the non meat protein sources are things that I can't eat as much of, like beans. So I'm somewhere in the middle in terms of my personal diet. And we'll see how it works. When I'm dead, we'll know if it's any good or not.
A hell of a way to prove it.
And whatever is the case, I'll still be dead when I'm dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to
Well, I guess
I want to feel good until then, though. Fred does too. I know.
that's true. Anyway, thanks very much, Richard, for this, and thanks everybody for participating. And we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Fred.
See you.
Uh,
Adios. Have a good
Adios.
week.